question for DOJ. They just announced it, and that was it. So I've not heard anything as of yet. But we've responded to the baseless attack, and my attorney has prepared a 2-page, 3-page letter responding to each and every allegation, which is baseless. And let's go through that, okay? Mm-hmm. So the first allegation is that the house in Queens that my father purchased almost 30 years ago, somewhere in the mortgage documents, he indicated that I was his wife as opposed to his daughter. But the deed, in fact, says I am his daughter. My father has since passed, and the house has since been sold. Period. Next. There's a house in Virginia that I purchased that I was a co-signer with for my niece. My niece's children, and I wanted to have her home. Mm-hmm. And so I co-signed the home. When I signed the power of attorney, I did it electronically. I wanted my niece to basically sign for me at the closing. At the bottom of the power of attorney, it indicated that I was a resident of Virginia. Prior to that, I had indicated to the mortgage broker in caps, all caps, I am not a resident of Virginia.
You're Tish from Brooklyn.
I'm Tish from Brooklyn, period. And in the mortgage documents, it indicates whether or not you plan on being a resident of Virginia, and I marked no, no, no. But of course, those were not publicly available. The only public document that's available is the power of attorney, which was not a basis for the mortgage.
In a letter I referenced that you had sent to Pam Bondi in April, you tried leveling with her as a fellow prosecutor. You wrote, quote, in your position as Florida's 37th Attorney General and now the nation's top prosecutor, you brought or will bring cases as part of your oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. When you do so based on probable cause in a criminal case or an initial finding of civil liability, you're not weaponizing. You are carrying out your sworn duty. No one is better than you to recognize that Attorney General James is being targeted for having done the same things in her work, including the case against Mr. Trump and his companies, end quote. Tell me about this. Did you get a response to that?
Well, when we sent the letter, there was deafening silence. I didn't even get an acknowledgement that it was received, let alone a conversation about what I said. So let that serve as whatever it is and their answer to my request. I also, in that letter, as you saw, she had quoted her in her confirmation hearings about what she said she would not do to become somebody carried out political retribution, which, like so many of the statements people are making to get themselves confirmed by the Senate, was good for the day that they said it, and then 5 minutes later, it doesn't become something that they carry forward. And one more thing to say about this so-called mortgage fraud allegation. Let's just call what it is, because I did set this out in the letter as well. You know, if you have a file on your house, bunches of piece of paper, and one of those pieces of paper say that it was a residence when it was an investment property, or vice versa, but every other piece of paper in the same file makes that clear, so that you have one that might have had a box checked wrong, that's not the subject of a criminal investigation or a case. It could be a mistake.
By a special attorney.
Yes, let alone appointing a special attorney. And on that, let's also point out something that I'm sure maybe people haven't figured this out.
Her lawyer, Abby Lowell, celebrity attorney, tends to represent Democrats. He had Menendez, he had Hunter Biden. He doesn't have a great recent track record, let's be frank.
No offense to Donald Trump's son-in-law. I think he represented Jared Kushner, too.
All right, so, he's been around this guy a little bit. So this is the thing, and I'm sure he's not hurting, and I'm sure he's a fine lawyer. I mean, he got where he got. I'm sure if you really dig into him, which I haven't, but if you really dig into his history, I'm sure he's got all kinds of wins. You don't get to that level by losing all the time. So there's that. But correct me if I'm wrong here, if I'm reading the fact pattern accurately and the chronology accurately, according to what you lay out at whitecollarfraud.com. In protecting her here, or attempting to protect her, he puts out all of this stuff about, hey, she said in an email in black and white in big, bold capital letters, I do not intend to occupy this location in Virginia as my primary residence. But doesn't that end up hurting her? Because 2 weeks later, when she has to sign the paper, the affidavit in question, she says she is going to occupy it. So doesn't highlighting the fact that she said A, but then did B 2 weeks later, just further jam her up?
Yes, would probably happen, here's my guess, okay? Everything else I told you is fact, but when I say opinion. This is my opinion. I think that she was in a rush to respond to the DOJ inquiry, and she pushed them to write this hastily written response to it without actually researching the issues that are involved. In other words, by doing what he did, he actually buried his client instead of helping his client. He implicated her for mortgage fraud, because if you read what she had written, her lawyer had written in response, that basically seals the deal. She committed fraud.
Is there setting up an intent defense? I made a mistake. I didn't mean it. That's not going to fly.
Doesn't fly under federal rules.
That's not going to fly.
It's a false statement to a bank.
Oops is not going to fly here.
Doesn't matter under federal rules.
Okay, and let me ask you another question now, because you brought up a fact.
She's trying the lazy reader defense.
Well, and she's trying to apply. What she's trying to do is she's trying to try it in the public sphere. That's why she got a lot more public right after it came out, and she started going to rallies and everything else, because she wants to couch it as she's being, a victim of revenge thanks to Donald Trump, etc. But I think people do see through it, because the facts are very compelling, and you've been laying them out, and you've been boxing her in. But I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Sam, because this is a salient point, and you kind of blew past it. And I think this is important, because a lot of people don't realize this. Now, I think Abby Lowell shouldn't be letting her talk, because, as you just said, she essentially just made a tacit admission that I did it, but I didn't mean it. All right. Crazy right there. Number two, they blew the timeline. They said, well, she said in bright letters, capital letters, that she wasn't going to intend to reside in Virginia. But then all you have to do is look at the timeline, and she did say that 2 weeks later when she signs the affidavit, which is the operative fact here. So there's that. I think there's a third mistake here that you alluded to. You're telling me that Lowell pointed to a different document as the thing that supposedly cleans this up, that changes her intent because it happened after the affidavit, or at least closer to the affidavit. You're going to have to lay that out for me, but it's actually an email that's not even pertinent? What is that?
No, there was an email that he said that was sent after the affidavit.
Okay.
But when he put together his response, the email that he claimed that was after the affidavit was one of the two emails before the affidavit.
So he just either got a fact wrong, or they're playing games with the court.
Well, irrespective, let's say he produces that document.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, okay, it doesn't sanitize the situation.
All right, hold on. All right, yeah. I get that.
On our sworn statement.
I get that. She made a false representation no matter when this thing falls. I get that. But I got to tell you, and I said the court, there isn't a court attached yet. It's in the grand jury. But, you don't make that mistake. All right. You're talking about, you are Abby Lowell. You're a big time attorney. You're representing the Attorney General of New York State. You don't point to a document that doesn't do what you said it does. You just don't do that. You're setting yourself up for a beheading. And I'm just telling you, I've been in enough cases to know that that is something that you don't get wrong. So it's the fact that you dug that out and said, well, he's pointing to an email from a couple of weeks earlier that doesn't do what he claims. The idea that it's a mistake, could it happen? Sure, it could happen to anybody. But I got to tell you, I'm skeptical of that. I think that he's playing games a little bit. He's trying to point to things that don't exist. He's playing with the timeline because he's trying to buy time to figure out what the hell to do here. Because frankly, it doesn't look that good for her.
He didn't need to buy time. He should not have responded publicly. He should have engaged in.
Well, that's not. I mean,
privately.
she's got to be asking him. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, the client calls the shots. You know that.
The client calls the shots. But you know something? When I was a criminal back in the day, many, many years ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, okay?
Almost 50 years now.
Lawyers that told me, Sammy, shut up. This is the way.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they. And look, if you tell the lawyer you got to get out there and represent me here, they're going to have to say, we don't know what. We're speculating. We don't know what the motives are here. But all I can say is this: from where I sit, them talking here has done them no favors, because it seems to me like what they've done. And if I'm sitting with a prosecution, I look at their public statements. I say, they're talking about stuff that doesn't exist, and they're playing games with the timeline. To me, that is a tell. And I start to smell blood.
She never mentioned the purported subsequent email when she's been talking to the press. It's like,
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't exist from her perspective. Look, I can just tell you this, Sammy. You're interviewing a perp or interrogating a perp, which is a little bit of a higher standard, right? You're going at the guy a little bit. And his story starts to change. And he starts to alluding to things that you know don't exist. You start to get your spidey sense going crazy because that's a real tell that, look, this person's hiding something. And I think that's a tell. I think that they haven't done themselves any favors, and they might have realized it because they have since kind of shut up. Am I wrong?
Well, the lawyer shut up. She's still opening up her big mouth, making this like political retribution, which it's not. But even if it is political retribution, even if I burned down a firehouse yesterday, the facts on the ground shows that she's guilty. It doesn't matter. She committed a crime, and there's no excuse. Let me give you an idea. She claims Donald Trump retribution. Well, you know something? She started committing mortgage fraud on a Brooklyn property in 2001 when Donald Trump was still a Democrat.
That's all for today. Thank you. If you want global news to keep you up to date on any new developments, please subscribe our channel and forward our content with your friends on social media and email. Thank you very much for keep supporting me. Stay safe, be blessed. Namaste.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.